JuryBox 3.0 is one of the most recent contenders, and in some important ways, probably the most sophisticated contender in the field of new applications designed to help attorneys during voir dire. And before I show you why, I want to talk a bit first about what is required during jury selection. As I've noted in past reviews, any electronic tool, be it a laptop or a tablet or an iPad, needs to help you collect information, including the panelists' own words, categorize and organize that information, and meaningfully put a value on that information, a weight that will contribute to your decision to challenge the panelist for cause, to use a peremptory strike, or to accept them. And the tool has to do all of that with the flexibility we know that different courtrooms, different judges, and different selection processes demand. But I would add another criterion. It has to be simple. In order to avoid adding stress to what is already a tense situation, the software and the hardware needs to be smooth and intuitive. The offerings that I've seen so far, most of them taking advantage of the iPad device, have been elegant, but have the challenge of striking a balance between simplicity and capability. A cautionary note is that if the application is too simple, then it may look slick, but it can end up sacrificing the flexibility that you need and end up failing at the ultimate test, which is to be better than the most common non-electronic alternative, the basic yet flexible post-it note. On that score, the JuryBox 3.0 is simple yet capable of a lot. In fact, it puts the check mark on just about everything that I called for in a video review of 2 iPad apps I posted earlier this year, as well as a review of the initial version of JuryBox that Ted Brooks and I wrote in the Jury Expert. Developed by Adam Gordon, a Deputy District Attorney for San Diego County, JuryBox is now in its 3rd version for Mac or PC. And the developer has been extraordinarily responsive to comments and suggestions, and the result is a package that I feel is sophisticated and flexible enough to meet the demands of the courtroom and leave the post-it note in the dust. Now, I won't take you through a full explanation of the capabilities of the program because those are included in a thorough explanation and downloadable tutorial from the developer's website, jurybox.com. But I do want to highlight a number of features from my own perspective as someone who's been using laptops to assist in jury selection for the past 6 years. The first advantage, JuryBox understands that courtrooms are laid out differently. Now that sounds trivial, but it can be critical. After opening the software and creating a new trial, your first option is to choose a virtual courtroom. And in addition to providing you with a few default layouts, the program also allows you to edit that layout with drag and drop flexibility to match the courtroom in your venue. Different users can even share templates, presenting the possibility that in the future you'll be able to simply search for your exact courtroom and download it. And that flexibility also extends to parties. While other programs assume that there are just 2 parties, JuryBox allows up to 4, for example, 1 plaintiff and 3 defendants. Now that's a feature that's especially useful in complex civil litigation. A second advantage to JuryBox is that it allows open-ended juror response. After you've laid out the courtroom, you have the ability to provide the detail of what you've learned about your potential jurors, including a dozen basic questions, as well as space for 50 questions that you're able to customize. That means you enter the questions that jurors will be asked, like, have you ever been sued? Or what do you think of the Occupy Wall Street protests? And you can fill in that juror's individual answer. And that's a critical feature, since most selection decisions won't be based on common demographics, but will instead be based on the experiences and the attitudes that matter the most in your case. The program also allows you to enter a group response. For example, if 10 panelists raise their hands in response to a question, you type Control-Q, you enter the response, and all of the jurors that it applies to. The third advantage is something that I haven't seen yet in any other commercial program or app. And that's the ability to place a value on the information that you're learning in voir dire, in effect, rating the potential juror to identify those most in need of a strike or a challenge. Not only does JuryBox allow you to value the panelists, but instead it provides 3 different ways of recording a rating, so there's sure to be one that matches the user's preferred approach. Now, the simplest method, if you prefer to just identify candidates as good or bad or unknown, is to use these triangles next to each juror. Click once, and it's flashing red for danger. Click twice, and it's green. Click 3 times and it's back to neutral. Now, if you want to get a little more specific than that, however, there's the ability to use these stars to give jurors a rating between 1 to 5 stars. This one, for example, gets 3.5. But if you're like me, you want an even more systematic approach to placing a value on what you learn in voir dire. This is where the personal information fields truly come into play. You can weight any response as favoring the plaintiff or the defense, for example, on a scale from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. And then the computer keeps a running calculation of the net score that the juror has. And that's something that your post-it note certainly cannot do. It's a good way of making sure that you're considering the full picture and not just the information you learned in response to the last question. Now, a score will never be a replacement for your own perception and gut check, but it is a pretty decent place to start. When the questioning's over and you're done evaluating the potential jurors by whatever method you choose, you can continue to use the program to keep track of what jurors are challenged for cause, what jurors are being struck by each party, so that in the end you have a record of all the decisions made, as well as a record of the seated jury. Now, there are a number of ways to customize the display and the operation that I haven't talked about. And the best way to learn about this program is by playing around with it via the free 7-day trial available at jurybox.com. There are 2 other considerations that I want to mention about the software before I encourage you to try it out, though. And one is the platform. Currently, the software runs on PCs and Macs. And the fact that most other tools for this purpose are currently coming out for iPads can make JuryBox seem a little bit less sexy. If you think about it, however, using a tool in the courtroom to actually record what the juror responses are, that's going to require a keyboard anyway. You just won't get that much down using the iPad's on-screen keyboard. So there isn't a huge step between an iPad with a keyboard and a laptop. And in any case, I understand the developer plans to release a version for iPad and other tablets as soon as the Adobe Air platform will support it. Now, the other issue is price. Right now, the JuryBox is $299 for an annual license, and that price is about 10 times what other apps are selling for without a license. The price point could be a deal breaker for some. But I'm thinking, given the stakes involved in most trials, it shouldn't be a deal breaker for many. The fundamental question for me on all of these apps is whether it's a novelty or whether it's something that you can actually use in court to help you capture and organize the full onslaught of information that you're facing in voir dire. Next to JuryBox, many of the early iPads for jury selection look like toys. And for me, it isn't so much to pay the equivalent of 1 billable hour a year for something that I can actually use in court. So in the end, if you're fine with paper grids and post-it notes and probably don't need anything more, then you're fine sticking with what you know. But if you're like me and have always felt that the task of collecting and organizing and placing a value on what you learn in voir dire cries out for a computer, then I think you'll be impressed with JuryBox. I encourage you to give it a try in your next trial.